Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Medical Cannabis Conference. First of all, I'd like to thank our speakers, Dr. Ian Titgen and Dr. Caroline Cremonese, for agreeing to share your knowledge with us. I would like to thank CAPS, the School of Pharmaceutical Science of Ribeirão Preto, the postgraduate program in toxicology, and the Department of Biomolecular Science for the financial, technical, and logistical support to make this event possible. I'm sure we will learn a lot about cannabis today. Take advantage of this opportunity. Now, I call Dr. Isadora Souza de Oliveira, our chair, to start the presentation of the speaker. Thank you for listening.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we will have presentations about medical cannabis. And our first speaker will be Professor Ian Titgen. Professor Titgen is a full professor at the University of Leuven in Belgium. He is the head of the Laboratory of Toxicology and Pharmacology at the Pharmaceutical Department of KU Leuven. He is also the director of the Division Biopharmaceutical Sciences of Leuven Research and Development. And today he will present the lecture, Medical Cannabis, Myths and Facts from Historical Use to Current Analytical Challenge. Thanks again, Professor Titgen, for accepting our invitation. And it's your turn.
Okay, thank you for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers and Professor Arantes for the kind invitation. As always, it's a pleasure to be here back in Ribeirão. And today I will take you on a journey about medical cannabis, where I will show you some myths and facts from historical use to current analytical challenges. And the analytical challenges are ones from forensic toxicology point of view. So we work for the Ministry of Justice in Belgium, and the trends we see with all these cannabinoids, I will show some examples. So without further ado, I will take you, as promised, on a journey both in space and time. You see here 6,000 years history of cannabis with a world map, and I will zoom in some points that I think are relevant for the knowledge of cannabis. And the oldest memories we have from cannabis dates back 4,000 years before Christ, and there was already a cannabis cultivation in the Pampo village, where cannabis was regarded as among the 5 grains farmed as a major crop, food crop. And it was used not so much for the psychotropic effects, but for textile, rope, paper, and oil. And also in the Far East, the pen Chao Ching is considered the world's oldest pharmacopoeia, where we can still read early records of cannabis at a medicinal drug this time. And the emperor at that time, Sheng Nu, recognized already its treatment using cannabis for over 100 ailments with rheumatism, malaria. So there is really an historical connection with the Far East with cannabis. Also, the Hindu religion, the Indians with the Vedas, also kind of pharmacopoeia, cannot be forgotten. Here, cannabis was smoked at daily services, religious rituals. Also in medicine, it was used to treat a plethora of ailments, epilepsy, rabies, anxiety, bronchitis, again showing far before the birth of Christ that cannabis was well known. Just alike here on the right below, the Egyptians with the Ebers papyrus, I hope you can read. It's again an example of the pharmacopoeia, where also together with the Egyptians, a bit later, the Greeks and the Roman Empire knew about cannabis. And for instance, the famous physician Dioscorides prescribed it for tooth pain and ear pain. The famous Greek doctor Claudius Galen, from which the name Galenica comes from, was also noted at a time to be in contact with cannabis. And then, coming back a bit to our current time period, we all know Napoleon. And Napoleon was in fact the person responsible for bringing the knowledge of cannabis from the region of Egypt to Western Europe. And cannabis at that time was indeed propagated to be used for the treatment of tumors, cough, jaundice, and from them we may not forget an Irish doctor, William O'Shaughnessy, and he brought, let's say, the knowledge of cannabis to the New World, to Northern America. But then something very strangely happened. We have several acts, 1940, 1937, 1970, and there was a kind of movement against the further use, exploitation of cannabis, driven by the legislation in Northern America. So marijuana, the use, cultivation was banned, and even if we go back to the United Nations types of drugs in 1970, it was a Scheduled I drug, just as if it were heroin. And this has had implications because the medical research and also potential advantages of cannabis were halted. It was not allowed to, in fact, investigate or to use it. And then two other points I have to mention. Here in 1964, THC, the tetrahydrocannabinol, the psychoactive component, was discovered by Dr. Mechoulian. And then a bit later, the cannabis receptors, so the proteins, the membrane-bound receptors, were also cloned and discovered in 1988. So that's fairly recent, CD1 and CD2. Can we talk about modern use? I gave a historical, let's say, overview, but there are also modern uses of the cannabis plant, and they are extremely diverse. There are industrial, textile type of applications, like canvas, rope, agrofiber composites, paper, cardboard, packaging, building material, especially for insulation, but also food, industrial products, where the emphasis is on oil, on solvents, personal hygiene, soap, shampoos, food, so from the seeds, from the oil, consumer textiles, handbags, shoes, fine fabrics, agricultural benefits. So there is definitely evidence for modern uses of the cannabis plant. When we talk about psychoactive activity of the cannabis, think always about the leaves and the flowers, especially also the female plant, because the resin it produces is then, of course, related to the tetrahydrocannabinol. Can be used in medicine, of course, it's well known recreative use, and also in sacraments, so more ritual use. Again, some historical slides. When you consider sailboats everywhere in the world, before the synthetic fiber was invented, remember that these sails were made out of cannabis. So the texture to the ropes you see here are very well suited, or were very well suited to serve these sailing ships. And here also is what we call a gravure, kind of a painting, where farmers cultivated cannabis with the purpose of using it agriculturally. Again, showing that the cannabis is not something new, a new psychoactive substance to be discovered. No, there is definitely historical use. What should we know about these cannabinoids, so cannabis and then cannabis-like molecules? Well, remember we have, I would say, three layers. You have the phytocannabinoids related to the plant. You have the more novel synthetic cannabinoids, man-made. And then you have the endocannabinoids, which we all have physiologically. On the left, the phytocannabinoids, of course, the THC, it stands for delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. And this 9 reflects also the position of an unsaturated carbon chain. THC is definitely the most well known, together with, let's say, brother and sister, the CBD cannabidiol. It is a bit related, but as you can see here, it's a diol, and it doesn't have this ring closed. If you go to the right, the endocannabinoids, you can say a kind of transmitters that we have in our body, just like acetylcholine, adrenaline. We have these neurotransmitters produced in the brain, and they bind to cannabinoid receptors. Very well known is the anandamide that you see here. And I'm sorry you cannot see. Is it possible to take this away? Because sometimes it's overlapping. So here we have another endogenous 2-AG molecule that we produce, and they are definitely. Maybe, yeah. Thank you. You can go back. Oh, thank you. Yeah, fantastic. So the 2-AG, thank you, Isadora. So the 2-arachidonyl glycerol, together with the anandamide, are naturally occurring cannabinoids, and they do a lot of things. So these are the three, together with the synthetic ones. Synthetic examples that exist both as medication, but are more notorious in terms of the new psychoactive substances, so being recreationally used. Coming back to the phytocannabinoids, we have the three worldwide, let's say, most popular species: Cannabis sativa, indica, referring to India, and ruderalis, more referring to the East, countries like Russia. When we talk about cannabis, it's weed. Then remember, you have a female version of the plant, a male version. People who are interested in the resin, in the THC, they cultivate the female plant. The male is being used for instance, textile, for the fibers. Marijuana is also a way of a form of weed that is being smoked and quite popular. Let's say in Amsterdam, everywhere in the world, we have names like Purple Haze, Northern Light, White Widow, and these are, let's say, dried flower tops that people can use and then consume via cakes or smoking or pizzas, whatever. What is the THC content? Well, it can differ. When you check the literature about this marijuana, you will encounter names like chemovars, cultivars, hybrids. And what does it mean? It relates to the genetic basis of the plant. So you have indeed chemovariety of plants that produce a lot of THC, some less. And this can be, let's say, exploited in a good way. If I refer to the United Kingdom, for instance, you have agricultural companies have a license granted by the ministry to cultivate a particular chemovar that is very low in THC, and then that cannot be, let's say, unused for the THC purpose. So the genetic basis is important, and also the way that you cultivate it or produce. It's just similar to compare it with tulips. Everybody knows tulips from the Netherlands. If you want to create, let's say, a purple tulip, you can also do some genetic modification to attain a particular chemo or cultivars. What is an hashish and hashish oil? This is a much more like fatty feeling, let's say, substance here. It looks like a bit a cake-like, but it's much more, let's say, rich in greasy oil-like substance. And what can we find in all these molecules? So again, we refer to the plant. I've introduced you already the THC, also the CBD, the two most well known. But remember, we have really tens of other cannabinoids, all naturally occurring, cannabinol, cannabis gerane, yes, cannabiflarin, and then CBC also. So it's really an enormous collection, and they can convert into each other while in fact the plant is maturating. So then the synthetic cannabinoids, again from a forensic point of view, very scary, because the market is, let's say, now forgiven, let's say, with all these new synthetic names, and these classes of synthetic cannabinoids are often abused recreationally, and they are very potent. So they are also called designer drugs, legalized, new psychoactive substances. But I will not dwell on that too much this afternoon. Here is yet an example. So this is what the plant makes, and this is a famous new psychoactive substance, one of the first generation, that looks very much like the natural variant. So remember, the new psychoactive substance is indeed a danger, and worldwide we should be taking care of legislation because overdoses are definitely occurring on a rapid scale. How do they make it? So especially in countries like China, India, all these molecules are made synthetically, and then in labs they are being sprayed on a plant that is, let's say, no pharmacological activity, then it's dried, packaged, and then you can buy it via the internet. The synthetic cannabinoids, we can expect still many more. This is from the European Monitoring Center on Drugs and Drugs of Abuse. And if you look then from a medical chemistry point of view, they are composed of a ring, a linker, a core, and a tail. So, and you see all the possibilities that we still can expect. And therefore, in terms of legislation, many countries apply now a generic list of illicit compounds, anticipating the appearance of novel NPSs on the market. Okay, that was for the synthetic ones. How does it work? It all comes down to the receptors. Whether you start from an endocannabinoid, like the anandamide we have, whether you start from the plant, or whether you start from synthetic, you can make THC synthetically, you can make all the other ones, the NPSs. They all will show some, let's say, selectivity or preference to bind to two receptors, these famous CB1 and CB2 receptors. And the endocannabinoid system, this system naturally occurring, is involved in regulating so many functions that we, as we speak, are not always aware of. So there is really evidence for regulating a variety of physiological processes like appetite, pain, pleasure sensation, our immune system, mood, memory. So there is a need to understand much better what are the endocannabinoids doing, and if we, let's say, are exposed to phyto or synthetic cannabinoids, what is the additional pharmacological effect that we can expect. And to understand this, the endocannabinoid system, you have to think about receptors and then communicating neurons. So in the central nervous system here, they communicate by sending chemical message, and then here the blue receptors can be, for instance, the CB1 type receptor, and all of a sudden it can see it's anandamide, or if you smoke a joint, the THC, and then something, of course, in the postsynaptic neuron is being initiated and processed. These cannabis receptors, they couple to G proteins, and the G proteins, if they are coupled to a particular GIO, then they are coupled to other channels like potassium channels, and then the signal from the pre to postsynapse is established. So in another way of representing it, the CB1 as opposed to the CB2, the take-home message of today to remember is CB1 is mainly, I cannot, let's say, be 100%, let's say, clear, but mainly CB1 is found in the brain. So any, let's say, psychotropic activity with THC is then often referred to action on CB1, while CB2 receptors are mainly found in the organs, spleen, tonsils, immune cells. But in both cases, the structure is fairly similar. It is called the G protein coupled receptor, and this then, of course, after coupling to a G protein, can initiate a signal in the cell for phosphorylation, calcium activity, potassium channel activity, and so on. So that's the basic scheme in terms of pharmacology. If you look at a human scale, so you can imagine CB1 as a lock where you need a key. The THC preferentially will modulate CB1, and this preferentially can be found in the central nervous system, while CB2 and the cannabidiol is, let's say, generalized a bit, more found in the periphery. And this is very beneficial to know this knowledge, because now we have the possibility of also designing ligands that ideally have a preference or selectivity only for one or only for two. So imagine if we can find a molecule that would be very efficient for CB2 alone, and you have of course something that can regulate appetite, now regulate the immune system without having the addiction profile. On the internet you will find many cannabinoid guides, and quite often if you see cannabis from the plant centrally located, they advertise the non-psychoactive versus the psychoactive compounds. And then you see the non-psychoactive, as we know today, again the CBD, the cannabidiol, the CBG, cannabigerol, and the CBC, cannabichromane. The psychoactive, definitely the THC that we know, but also the tetrahydrocannabivarin and the cannabinol. So that's the general scheme. What few people know, and so people don't realize, is that the pharmacology of these cannabinoids is really complex. And then we have to go back in head to basic pharmacology. If you plot, let's say, a drug in function of the concentration and what the drug does in response, do not consider, let's say, that's an agonist or antagonist, and it's finished. No, it's much more complex than that. You can describe full agonists, partial agonists, neutral antagonists, and even inverse agonists, how, let's say, strange this may sound, it is possible. On top of that, you also can talk about allosteric modulations, so-called ALS, positive allosteric modulation, negative allosteric modulation, and the molecules that are highlighted here in the table often are promiscuous. I mean, do not think that they will only touch the CB1 receptor. They can also modulate a TRP channel, have some preference for an opioid channel, and this all complicates, let's say, the interpretation of what they do in vivo. Now, the very first ones here are the endogenous one. You see anandamide, then the 2-HG, and for some we don't know much. Affinities sometimes are lacking. Some are partial agonists, some are full agonists, and then of course that's the endogenous one. Then the table shows some examples of the phytos, so from the plant. And then the last couples ones are the synthetic ones. The most you start abusing synthetic cannabinoids, of course the whole system is kind of dysregulated because of the potency of these molecules. What is then next? The role of the other constituents of the plant. And then we come to the terpenes and terpenoids. And it's my impression that there also we still need a lot of research. It's a blind gap. I take one example. Look at the geraniol. The geraniol and also molecules that you know, eucalyptol, camphene, then terpinolene, limonene, very well known molecules that are tasteful, that smell good, and we like in our dishes. But the geraniol is very important to understand why the plant makes this THC and CBD. Because the biosynthesis of the phytocannabinoids is known, and you have to consider this as a terpene going together with an acid. So here you have the geraniol derivative, it's called geranyl diphosphate, and it, let's say, associates with the olivedrolic acid. Yes, and then you have the cannabigerolic acid, and from this you can make the cannabinochromic acid, the delta THC acid, and the cannabinolic acid. You see, in all cases, it's a carboxylic function. So what the plant makes is not the psychoactive THC, it's always the precursor, the acid. Are these active? In most cases not. You still make them active while consuming. So that's the black, that's the red, and then this is what the plant makes. And again, what few people know is when they smoke cannabis, What they in fact do is a conversion from the natural acidic form of THC, because they smoke, they heat, and while doing that, they do in fact a decarboxylation. And then they produce in situ the THC that is active, and then afterwards, when the THC is taken up, we have the cytochrome P450 liver enzymes that produce the two famous metabolites, the 11-hydroxy, and then the more famous urinary metabolite, the carboxy-THC. And it's this metabolite that's in the urine for more than a week, so that can be detected or used forensically. The legislation in many countries makes that cannabis is still considered legal under the conditions that you have less than 0.2% of this THC. And that's not much, it's really low, but it's possible. And when you talk about results from hospitals or traffic control and people have been checked on their urine, it's always this carboxyl, that's a derivative or metabolite that is being checked because of the long detection time in urine. How do people use it in general? Very brief. Joint, worldwide, this is mostly known. It can be contained or mixed with nicotine and tobacco. You see all types of examples here. The water pipe is also popular. Some people think it's more healthy. It's not the case. You also have this in the vapor, in the mist, let's say, you also have the carcinogenic molecules. The vaporizer, yes, together with the e-cigarette. The e-cigarette that was intended to vaporize nicotine in the, for instance, glycol solvent is now also being used for THC, for the synthetic cannabinoids, with all the dangers behind. So that's on the rise, vaporizers. The pipe, not so much, that's more historical use and for the older generation. The space cake, yes, space cake is popular, also in countries like the Philippines, in Thailand. The space pizza is very popular, and it's dangerous for backpack tourists, students that do not have a lot of money. They go for a quick lunch, and then it's really what I tell you, it's a forensic case. It's kind of a setup. So the owner of the restaurant warns that the students you have been eating cannabis, the police is coming, and yeah, being in jail in Philippines or Thailand is not a nice prospect. And then you wonder, is this correct or not? So watch out if you're in particular countries and they offer you a space pizza. Cannabis candies are also known, cannabis tea, so everything is available for oral consumption. But now the medical cannabis. Often people think, this is CBD, and I can expect everything from this sole molecule CBD. Yeah, that is the question, is this true or not? From the European Monitoring Center on Drugs and Drugs of Abuse, I've taken this summary, medical purpose, the typology. Examples of medicinal products and their active ingredients, for instance, sesamet and cannabis. It contains mabinol. This is a synthetic cannabinoid similar to THC. Then the marinol and syndros. It contains dronabinol, is purely man-made synthetic THC. Sativex, containing abiximols, and this is equal quantities of CBD and THC, so it's really different from the two first ones. And then we have epidiolex. It contains cannabidiol, and this is a plant-based CBD. So that's available on the market. And in terms of preparations, you can purchase raw cannabis, you can go to a pharmacist for medicinal preparations or standardized preparations. Here are some examples, marinol and syndros. So we talk about synthetic made THC. It's not a success story, because of course there is this risk of addiction if you take such a product with only THC. This has been recently FDA approved for epilepsy observed in children. And it's called Dravet syndrome. And the epidiolex, if you read, let's say, the ingredients, it's not 100% CBD. It's very strange also to me to see, okay, it's like 98% CBD they claim, but what's the rest? I could not figure out, but it's being, let's say, advertised as cannabidiol. Most popular, I don't know, situation in Latin America and Brazil here, but definitely in Europe, most popular are these yellow plastic boxes that people usually buy in the Netherlands, in Germany. And this is then cannabis that arrives in the form of floss. And floss from the Latin flowers. And you have then different types of options. You can buy bedrocan, bedrobinol, and you see sometimes it's really highly concentrated in THC and almost no CBD. Sometimes it's with less THC and also almost no CBD. Then you have also strains that you can buy, mediol, medica, and bedrolite, with, for instance, equal percentages of THC and CBD, or 40%, almost no, or bedrolite, much more CBD. So everything is on the market, and in Germany and the Netherlands it's legal, but not everywhere in Europe. So again, there is a lack of harmony in terms of legislation. To the best of my knowledge, if you would think, okay, I definitely want to buy this, the highest chance of being really effective and treat your, let's say, symptoms is a formulation where you have two molecules together present in an equal concentration. So if I would have a choice, I would go for the Bediol that you see here, because there is really recent literature evidence that the presence of CBD will reduce the psychoactivity of THC, and conversely, the presence of THC will help to boost the pharmacology of CBD, which is very interesting to see. So the effect of the two is there, but you need the two molecules. And from a legal point of view, this is a problem, because you can say in most countries, THC is allowed less than 0.2%. Yes, this is far more than 0.2%. So all these people, when they buy it and they go to France, they go to Belgium, in fact, as soon as they cross the border, they are, or they could be, let's say, judged with an illegal activity. And that's a pity. We should try to harmonize this. What I also see on the internet, sometimes claims from marketeers that are really astonishing. I've chosen this. I found this on the internet. This company manufactures sportswear impregnated with CBD. Fantastic. You can buy clothes and you have the effect of the CBD. You see here this woman. This creates multi-layered CBD placements within the garment, strategically designed and placed to line you and with your muscle groups. Fantastic. You don't have to go to the gym anymore, and of course there is no scientific proof for this, but this is the real situation today. Non-scientists, people are being, let's say, overwhelmed by claims that definitely are not always justified. And also, from forensic toxicology or pharmacology point of view, we must be honest and humble. We don't understand yet what all these different components create what we call an entourage effect. So in the plant, you have, of course, this CBD, THC. You have the terpenes and the terpenoids, like shown. And it is anticipated or surmised that in fact all these together have definitely let's say, a kind of pharmacological synergism, and that presence does matter. But we have really no clear idea what the function of all these molecules is in detail. So I do believe there is an entourage effect of synergism. Do not only focus on THC or CBD. If you see here advertisements as analgesic, antibacterial, anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, etc., together also with CBD, be critical, because the scientific evidence for all these claims is definitely not there. For instance, anti-cancer, I haven't seen any paper that cannabinoids in general, CBD, THC or a combination, would be an anti-cancer type of drug. So be critical. From the scientific point of view, again, the chemical classes of cannabinoid types is enormous. People don't realize it. You see here how many compounds you can isolate, and this is a challenge also analytically. Total cannabinoids 120, together with all the other molecules like terpenoids. So a plant, Cannabis sativa lineus, can contain more than 500 different compounds, which is impressive. And therefore, it's no surprise that some people see the cannabinoid field as the holy grail to cure everything, from being anxiolytic, antipsychotic, antiepileptic, neuroprotective, vasorelaxant, anti-ischemic, anti-cancer, etc. You see here. Again, we have to argue, we still have to learn a lot, but for some indications the evidence is very, very poor as we speak. Here also, if you compare from the 1930 to, let's say, 2020, again, I found this on the internet. Be critical, cannabis and your health. I'm definitely pro medical cannabis and particular indications, but we still need more, far more clinically reliable and controlled studies. Here is an example of 60 peer-reviewed studies. It's a very old meta-study from 1990 to 2014, the very first one, in fact, to check. We see studies published in the literature, peer-reviewed on medical marijuana, and if they claim to be beneficial to treat nausea, Huntington's disease, pain, Parkinson, etc., what is now the study telling us? And as you can see, for multiple sclerosis, let's say the evidence is the strongest. So what does it do with multiple sclerosis? The muscle spasms that these patients experience can indeed be treated with medical cannabis. That is clear. And in many countries, I don't know the situation in Brazil, but in many countries, for those type of patients, it is allowed that a neurologist prescribes the drug, and then you can completely legally use it. There is a much demand to enlarge this application to other patients as well, but some countries and federal agencies of health are a bit hesitant. But for other studies, the pro and con ratio is very disappointing. Also, the number of studies at that time done is not giving a clear answer, showing that the Holy Grail, again, we should be critical. So to summarize this, again, I refer to the European Monitoring Center of Drugs and Abuse. What is the evidence for the medical use of cannabis and cannabinoids? Nausea, vomiting associated with cancer chemotherapy. Several cannabinoids have been tested. Weak evidence. Weak evidence. Appetite stimulant in patients with AIDS-related wasting. Weak evidence for dronabinol THC. Muscle spasm with MS, as I said, moderate. So you see even the literature, it's not convincing, it's moderate. Patients report reductions, but more limited impact on clinical ratings. Different kinds of pain, moderate. Palliative care for cancer, insufficient evidence. Then this epilepsy in children, moderate. So this is now the epidiolex medication that's FDA approved. And then other medical uses, such as sleep disorder, anxiety, depression, degenerative neurological disorders, inflammatory bowel disease, insufficient. So let's be honest, the strength of evidence is not overwhelming or very compelling. So needless to say that we need more studies to eliminate these spots. More research is needed at a fundamental level to knowledge what do these molecules do. How the CB1, CB2 in the central system, in the periphery, analyze it, data, facts, also clinical trials testing before we can make any final conclusion. What is then the effect on the roadside testing? We also do in my lab for the police tribunal, so for the Ministry of Justice and all the traffic accidents, the drug analysis and alcohol. And of course, cannabis is illegal, probably here in Brazil too. But then the question is, imagine if we go further with the medical cannabis, will it be abused by, let's say, drivers under the influence of cannabis, while they use it recreationally and say, I have a prescription, I use, let's say, the legally prescribed version. Can we, let's say, anticipate as scientists to solve the problem? Oops. What I always say, so in some countries, saliva is being used as test, easy test on the roadside, and then they ask for the driver to put a sample here. And I've never been an enthusiast of this saliva testing in toxicology for cannabis. And the reason is very simple. If you look at the absorption of THC, Remember, this is a very lipophilic molecule. So as a function of time, the distribution of THC in the body will be very variable. Initially in the blood you have a peak, and then you have an almost exponential decay, fairly rapid. Then the brain concentration will rise, and then you have, of course, the effect on your behavior, on the driving capacities, and then it also goes down. And then much later on, it appears in low perfusion tissues and in fat. And if you rely on saliva testing, you can have, let's say, a very high concentration in the blood, because blood and saliva more or less is comparable, and the driver can be completely having all the capacities of properly driving. It's possible, and yet he will be convicted because it's very high in the blood or in the saliva. And vice versa, if you have a driver that is, let's say, somewhere here, and it's below the cutoff, you will have a negative result, it goes free, and yet, at that moment of testing, the THC in his brain is very high, and then he will be a danger as a driver. And this situation is typical for lipophilic molecules, not there for cocaine, for benzodiazepines, for amphetamines. There I'm definitely in favor of saliva testing in road traffic, but for cannabis it's not really a solution. But can we as analytical toxicologists then discriminate between medical cannabis use that people really need, or then recreational use? I can say yes. Several labs have published protocols, like this one published in Forensic Science International, where with the availability of the high-resolution LC-MSMS instruments, we can check all these molecules in hair, in urine, in blood. It's not an easy task, it's also a bit time-consuming, but to show you evidence that we are able to discriminate somebody who claims he's not using it recreationally, medically, and vice versa. So ultimately, a test can show, based on the presence of all these molecules and metabolites, where the truth is. And with this, I thank you for your attention. I hope I've taken you on a journey, both historically, in time and space, to some, let's say, actual challenges we face. I do believe in the future of medical cannabis. We will hear more in the next talk, and if there are still questions, I'm happy to answer. So thanks again.
Thank you, Professor Titiga. It was a very nice presentation with a current subject to treat. If someone has questions, time for questions. There is questions in YouTube.
Yeah.
Professor Titiga, Charlie Julian is asking, how do you see the future of medical cannabis research in Belgium? Do you see foreigners researchers working with it, maybe?
Okay, thanks for the question. Yes, I'm very positive in terms of medical cannabis application and also legislation that will follow. It is my opinion, and from a medical point of view, it's maybe a dangerous, let's say, point of view, but for this type of use, a type of regulation in society causes harm reduction, and that's not a bad thing if you compare it to alcohol. Thanks to regulation, we can consume alcohol, which is also a drug, in a kind of responsible way. Not drinking methanol because you would become blind, not drinking too much that you cause problems in traffic and society. But so regulation sometimes has advantages, and I also believe here, both medically and also recreationally, if you can find a framework where it's regulated, then all the bad cannabis, let's say, on the market will disappear, and at least you know what is being delivered. And I can say this from my own analysis. Every week we do this analysis from seized plants and products, oils, etc. And the whole spectrum is available. So you don't know how much THC there is, also heavy metals and pesticide residues. So that is definitely I hope that there will be a regulatory framework. And then purely medically speaking, again, I think we have to do an effort to the time we've lost since 1970s and the strict bans in Northern America, where we still need to fill the blank spots of all the cannabinoid system, where we absolutely don't know what it's really doing as compared, let's say, to the cholinergic system, the adrenergic system. We still need to learn a lot. And therefore, I'm happy that many countries worldwide have a kind of more now open view or liberal view to allow medicinal cannabis. And I'm not propagating it to let's say, attract more recreational users per se, but I do believe that if you see a particular patient with a particular set of symptoms, and the classical approach of treating that person is not really satisfactory, then I can tell you that also countries like Australia have already rolled out a kind of protocol that physicians are allowed to use medical cannabis as not an alternative way of treatment, but as another hope to give relief to the patients. And then I said, well, if then the ultimate goal is served, why would you be against it? And then maybe a last point, worldwide we all agree in hospitals to use cocaine for operations in, let's say, throat, ear, nose. In pain clinics we use morphine, nobody makes a big deal. If it's medically, let's say, justified, well, why not the same policy for medical cannabis? As long as it's justified and the product is certified and pure, I have nothing against it. So I'm hopeful and positive for the future.
Thank you. We have one more. Professor Vinicius Antonio is asking, hi Professor, Brazil has a huge potential to explore more cannabis research. However, we do not do it. How can we face all those obstacles? Thanks in advance.
Well, I think there is a task as scientists to persuade legislation, so the politicians in any country in the world, to inform them, because it's a complicated matter. Even we as scientists don't understand completely how the cannabinoid system works. What can you say about, let's say, people from law school? But at least what I mean is there is a task for us to inform people who make the laws and say, look, if we do this, that's the benefit we have. And then try to persuade them to change laws, otherwise it will be always like in a gray zone of legal illegality, and that's not the way to go.
Thank you again. We have more questions for the social media? No? You have a question?
I have a question.
In many countries where cannabis-based medications are available, they regulate the cultivation in the country, separating the high THC plants and high CBD with 0.2 THC plants. So in these countries where the regulation already advanced, they can plant cannabis with no THC whatsoever. How is the regulation for plant in Belgium? There is any?
No, in Belgium we are in a transition phase, and it's also a very slow process to convince legislation of the benefits. But a perfect example of a country that you illustrate is United Kingdom. This is very well regulated, and you have acres of agricultural activity producing a particular chemo variety, as I mentioned, with, of course, inspectors, like in the food chain, and this works well. So I'm definitely in favor of such a model.
You have more questions? It's a nice subject. It's from Ernesto. In connection with Vinicius' question, where do you think the difference lies when we compare the cannabidiol legalization across Europe and the mysticism we currently have in Brazil? He asks, where do you think the difference lies when we compare the cannabidiol legalization across Europe and the mysticism we currently have in Brazil?
It's not an easy question to answer because, of course, the Brazilian situation I don't know so well. What I can tell you from the internet, and this is worldwide knowledge, of course, is that more and more sites propagate conversion of legal variants of cannabinoids, you can say precursors, and propagate really all kinds of sometimes chemically simple reactions to convert a legal variant into an illegal. And this is a scary, let's say, observation because it's showing that people try to find way out to circumvent legislation and still try to get access to something which is illegal. And to avoid this, again, we as scientists, we should advertise also and publish as much as knowledge and the dangers from this conversion from legal variants to illegal ones, because that's not, let's say, ideal if I see this trend. But I agree with the next question, it is a trend.
Thank you, Professor. We have more questions here. No? Thank you so much, Professor. It was a very nice presentation, and congratulations. Thank you. And now, the next speaker is Dr. Carolina Cremonese. Dr. Cremonese is a pharmacist, master, and PhD in science. Nowadays, she is president and scientific director of Associação Canábica Maria Flor. And today, she will present the lecture Access to Cannabis for Medical Purposes in Brazil. Carol, thanks for accepting our invitation. And now it's your turn to speak.
I would like to thank all the organization for inviting me to come to lecture today. And it's an honor and a pleasure to come to my home, where I stayed almost 8 years here with Dr. Eliane and also with Dr. Titget. So it's enormous honor to be here and talk about how we are going to access medicinal cannabis in Brazil, because it's forbidden, but it's not. We don't have regulation, we don't have legalization, but we still have an enormous amount of patients in need. And for some of them, they can access because it's legal to buy in drugstores, and also it's legal to import, but it's not legal here to produce yet. So how we are doing to give these people a choice? As Dr. Young was saying, we have the type of cultivar that comes with THC high products, and also the CBD high products. Then it's two different species, cultivars, that we can grow, and they both can use as a medication. You see, most of the countries that already regulated medicinal cannabis, they grow this kind of cannabis because they have very low psychoactive substance such as THC. They have high percentage CBD products and high percentage fibers, so they can apply industrially. And they have a very short cycle of life, and it yet is growing in many countries. Versus marijuana. Marijuana, maconha, whatever you want to say, it's the same plant. The difference is the genetic. This genetic says that I have high THC content, 5 to 35. This THC is a psychoactive substance, but it also has medical uses, and the science is already proving us that. And it's illegal in most of the countries. To talk more about the production of these plant-based medications, we have to understand some of their morphology. We use the female plants because they have a high percentage of resin. And these resins, they produce these very small heads here, pink heads. They are full of phytocannabinoids and terpenes and other active molecules. And these forms a resin coating all the flower. And this resin is used by the plants to protect them from insects and UV solar rays. But then, it's a very rich and powerful resin because both THC and CBD, and we are talking about only two molecules. Dr. Yan already showed us that the plant can produce over 120 phytocannabinoids and over 500 molecules with terpenes and alkaloids, and they are all produced here in these small glands, and they cover the leaves with like a very small sugar leaves, they call. It looks like a sugar over the flower. I have another image that we're going to see. And what the science already tells me that we have evidence, okay? Nausea, inflammation, chronic pain, anxiety, seizures, cancer, post-traumatic stress disorder, Crohn's disease, Parkinson's, and multiple sclerosis. These are some of the evidences for CBD and THC, but it doesn't stop here, okay? There's several other conditions that can be treated by cannabis, not only by CBD and THC. Not because cannabis is the holy grail. It's not. The holy grail of our body, it's our body. It's the endocannabinoid system. And learn how the endocannabinoid system works. It's the way we can reach any molecule inside produced by cannabis or any other plants. Because we have a trend now that is cannabis, but can be other plants with a high phytocannabinoid producer. So to understand cannabis, we must understand endocannabinoid system, receptors, enzymes, distribution in our body. We must understand which cannabis compounds can interact with this endocannabinoid system, and then how cannabis can modulate endocannabinoid system. That's how we can work that, and we can understand why one unique plant can treat so many conditions nowadays. So, just to start, we started with CB1 and CB2, which was discovered in the end of 1988, right? So, it's been less than 40 years we've been studying endocannabinoid system. It's still very, very young system that it's a few time to understand the complexity of the system. CB1 and CB2, they are the two mostly studied receptors, but cannabinoid compounds can interact with transient receptors with GPR receptors also. Okay? And knowing their distribution, like CB1, it's mostly distributed in the brain and central nervous system, but also present in nerves and organs. CB2 mostly associated with immune system and peripheral organs and muscles also. TRVP1 in blood, bone marrow, tongue, kidney, liver, stomach, and ovaries. TRVP2, skin, muscles, kidney, stomach, and lungs. And lymph nodes, also intestines and cerebellum, pancreas, intestinal tract, and small amounts. So, all the phytocannabinoids found in this plant can interact with all these receptors and more. Cannabis can interact with GABA receptors, opioid receptors, and so. We understand now that endocannabinoid system is a regulating system. It's a very complex system that regulates all the other systems, including the nervous system. Because it can regulate the nervous system, you can imagine how extent is the applicability of learning how to modulate this system is. This is the holy grail, learning how to modulate the endocannabinoid system. And cannabis is a tool for treatment and study the endocannabinoid system because it interacts with so many receptors in so many ways that one unique molecule could not. So today we are studying unique molecules, and we are synthesizing synthetic cannabinoids, and we are testing them alone. But Dr. Ian already pointed you out. We have entourage effect. The entourage effect comes from the diverse type of cannabinoid compounds with terpenoids, alkaloids, and interacting with our endocannabinoid compounds. We have the third type of cannabinoids that they're not found in nature, they're not found in our body, and they can be very dangerous and toxic. They can also be a medication, but depends on the dose, depends on patternization, and depends on studies. What we know now, they are building up some very hybrid, stranger molecules and putting illegal markets for recreative purposes. This is a zoom of the coating. These glands, they are on top of the flower, and this is the active compounds we use to produce our medication, our oil. And there are many ways of extracting these glands. The unique compounds go over 120 phytocannabinoids and over 500 active molecules. Then you put them together, 5, 7, 8, 10 receptors that we are going to discover yet, which interacting with these compounds all over your body and all of these molecules. So we have an orchestra inside our body, and our orchestra that works regulating your system one way or another. You can produce yourself these endocannabinoids, and you can regulate yourself with many other ways, like exercise also can provide a good load of endocannabinoids for you. But in case where there's a pathology involved and your endocannabinoid system are not going to work very well, and you have like a deficiency of regulation in your body, so you have a symptom, you have a pathology, not only because your endocannabinoid system is not working very well, but because of diverse motives. Anyway, once you put in this sick body, this patient can access the down or the up or down regulation of their system, because the phytocannabinoids can replace the endocannabinoids that are not being produced. And there's the terpenes. We're still talking about phytocannabinoids. But the terpenes, and here I have some of them, because we have a lot. For example, terpinolene. We have antioxidant and boost immunity effect. Also, limonene. We have enhance mood, easy stress, anti-inflammatory, and antioxidant. It's present in the citrus, peppermint. It's their aroma. Each plant, each strain, each cultivar comes with a different aroma and a different potential because of these terpenes. So each cultivar will provide my body or my patient's body a new experience of enhancing his health. And to just close my thinking, how we can modulate endocannabinoid system with these unique compounds. So we have this neuron. It's important that you know endocannabinoids are synthesized by precursors located in our membranes from arachidonic acid. So they are derivatives from these molecules. And they are released according with demand. The endocannabinoid system knows how to recognize when they are needed, and they don't stock endocannabinoids. They produce by demand. So if you have a pathology and your demand production are not okay, you can fill up with phytocannabinoids, which we are talking about cannabis, but it can also be any other plant. Nah? We just have to find a new plant with full of phytocannabinoids, such lupullo. Lupullo is also, it's cannabis friends, like their cousin. They are related, and they also produces phytocannabinoids, but in a very lower proportion. You can supplement your endocannabinoid system, which is not okay, with phytocannabinoids. So it connects here with this cannabinoid receptor or any other receptor that the cannabinoids interacts on, and will regulate the release of these neurotransmitters for up or down depending on your pathology. So imagine a kid experiencing 70, 80 times a day convulsions. 80 times a day. It's 4 convulsions per hour. This kid cannot learn, this kid cannot walk, this kid cannot talk. She can barely hold up his hand, his neck, because of this. And all the anticonvulsivants, antipsychotics, and all the medications, they do not work. So once you introduce cannabis, this is a typically Dravet kid. Dravet syndrome is epilepsia refractaria, how do you say? It's very difficult treatable epilepsy condition. Kids with this syndrome cannot achieve adulthood sometimes, and with cannabis it's possible, because cannabis can downregulate the stimulation of these neurons. So, together with all the anticonvulsivants, drugs, you can put some cannabis to downregulate and give these kids some quality and conditions to live. So, when we put together terpenes and flavonoids, we can modulate if a strain can work more on anxiety, or more as anti-inflammatory, or more as antispasmodic, or more tumor for cancer treatment. So we can achieve modulating and studying which strains are going to produce the terpenes and flavonoids desirable for this treatment. It's a very specific road, but there are some of researchers going through this way, studying terpenes and how they interact together with phytocannabinoids for the entourage effect. The entourage effect was proposed first for Michulin, the researcher that discovered the THC molecule. And in this time, he was already studying, back in that time, he was studying that the isolated molecule is good. But when they put together the full extract, it can enhance their activity because of the synergic chemistry of them. So this is a nature very enlightening it's foi uma sessão que eles fizeram da Nature only for cannabis section. Special issue. Thank you. And they was proposed by Michulin in 1998, and Ethan Russo, which another researcher that is studying a lot about safety and toxicity of medical cannabis and how we can safely apply this medication, even full spectrum medication. It can be used because this researcher are already studying this. And before that, Ethan also suggests that terpenoids have the potential to reduce psychosis and memory problems with THC and augment more positive effects of THC. Also, myrcene, one of the terpenoids we're studying, can be improve sleep in people with chronic pain, and limonene can alleviate anxiety. So, when they are used in concert, they can fine-tune our endocannabinoid system. And these fine-tune are very observed in my patients. Not mine because I'm not a doctor, but I'm very close contact with the patients that are using the association, the ONG non-profit for cannabis access. And how do we start to access cannabis here in Brazil? For instance, it always starts with the prescription. With no prescription, you go nowhere. You have to have a prescription and a letter from your doctor indicating cannabis medication with your diagnosis. Vets and dentists also can prescribe in our country because of this RDC. RDC 17/2015 says that all habilitated prescriber can prescribe cannabidiol or cannabis-based products. But only less than 1% of the doctors know how to prescribe or prescribe. So it's a very very low percentage of doctors that are familiar with cannabinoid therapeutic way of treatment. So we have three ways of accessing product-based cannabis-based medication through importation. The importation was the first. It started in 2014, almost 15 years after it started the legalization in Canada and the United States for medical purposes. It requires Anvisa pre-authorization for buying. In the past, it took like months, but today, if you want an Anvisa authorization, you can receive in the same day. If you have a prescription and an indication, it costs from 300 to 3,000 and depends on dosage, which medication your doctor is prescribing, and the dollar quotation also, because depending if dollar goes ups and downs, you have to pay for the importation. And it can be very, very expensive by the end of your month, okay? This is the cost per month, not per year. We need a controlled prescription, and you can spend a long time waiting for the medication. Because of the importation process, I don't know now, but in the past, this kind of medication could be blocked in your alfândega, and you spend months waiting in your home with your sick child, convulsing 80 times a day. So this is very difficult. And the national. In 2014, Anvisa allowed that our pharmaceutical industry to import cannabidiol only, CBD only, and THC only. This was the first with THC and CBD approved in our country, but before was only cannabidiol. So our national industry can import cannabidiol and sell in the drugstores for 2.7K, or in a lower dose, 206, very lower dose. So it doesn't require Anvisa authorization. It's available in our country, but it's a very prohibitive costs. Our population, they don't have this kind of money to keep this medication every month. And some of them still have to use 2 packs. So it goes for 4K to 8K per month. Depends on dosage, depends on product, and depends on your doctor. And we live in a tropical country, very abundant land country, and we have very specialized experts here in Brazil, which can grow cannabis and produce, even the homemade way, plant-based medication, which cannot be registered because Anvisa doesn't allow to register a production made in Brazil. It is a low-cost production. It's a homemade tincture, oil, or preparation. It takes a very high mountain of bureaucracy, and only associates can use. This is the way Brazilians are working with cannabis nowadays. So we have more than 50 non-profit, non-governmental organizations here in Brazil that are planting and producing their own oil for treatment with several families, thousands of families. So I'm going to talk about how these ONG, this is non-profit, non-governmental organizations, are doing for work here in Brazil. Our great barrier is misinformation and prejudice. And you only know these 2 points when you start to study. When you go back in the history and you learn what was the process of cannabis illegalization. Because in the past, cannabis was legal. We had farms and it was a commodity in the United States. But after 1914, we start a series of taxations and regulamentations, and 1970, the prohibition, the effective prohibition, together with Schedule I drugs like heroin. Here in Brazil, we have the anti-drug law. What the anti-drug law says to me about cannabis. Cannabis is a drug, and it's forbidden, unless it's for medical purposes or for research purposes. So we have here an administrative breach. Is it to work with? This is how our lawyers in Brazil are working with. So based on this law, and based in all your medical history, in your indication and your prescription, Brazilian now can plant in national soil because of this law. So we have over 500 permissions today. In 2018, in 2020, this was less than 200 authorizations, individual authorizations for planting. And on Visa, we have these RDCs, which starts the regulation. The 2015 starts with who can buy cannabidiol, who can prescribe cannabidiol, how you can do to use cannabidiol. And 2019, we start with, well, we can produce cannabidiol here in Brazil, but only if you import cannabidiol. So it's very, very gray area we are landing on, but still, we must do it because our patients cannot afford 4K medications every month. And what is about the regulatory aspects? since we don't have any regulation for using, exploring, and planting here in our country, we must understand what this means, because while we are fighting a drug war, very unfair drug war, we could be providing public health just by regulating the medicinal marijuana in Brazil. It can be cannabidiol, it can be THC, it can be anything, but it has to exist, the regulation, because the regulation can improve public health, can license dispensaries, industry, can workplace safety. We can line up which are the requirements to work with cannabis. We can use on criminal defense, because anti-drug law doesn't discriminate how many do you have to carry with you today to be accused of being a user or being a drug dealer. So you can be considered a drug dealer with 0.5 grams of marijuana. And you cannot be a drug dealer if you're found in a plane with 500 kilos of cocaine. So it's very ambiguous law. Taxation. Once this industry and these applications, medical, adult, or industrial applications of cannabis, once they are regulated, they pay taxations, which can improve social impact in education, in health, in politics, and in law. So we have more to gain regulating the use than forbidding the use today, because we're spending tons of money fighting a war that the science already proved to you that is not a war anymore. It's basically harmless plant if you use correct, if you discriminate, if you regulate, if you standardization this medication, you can improve the economy of the whole country, not the economy only, but all the social impacts involved. So for this, we have the law project 399 from 2015 is still not a law, okay? But it's about a socially responsible regulation of the production, distribution, and consumption of cannabis while protecting the public health. So we are dealing with this rotation nowadays in the Congress to regulate both medical and industrial use. Here in Brazil, we don't talk about recreational or adult use. We're still facing medicinal and industrial purposes. Dr. Titigat already showed you the world map where cannabis first evidence was appeared, but we know that our ancient civilizations, they use cannabis as a source of food, textile, fibers, sports, and rituals. And in these, while this was happening, the medication, the therapeutical applications was improved over the centuries. There's a neuroscientist here in Brazil. He's called Siddhartha Ribeiro. And he compares cannabis cultivars as dog breeding. Because over 10,000 years, we are breeding cannabis together with us. And today we have over 1,000 different cultivars. So we're breeding cannabis all this time. And each cannabis will work one way or another, for one condition or another, depends on the application. The most reliable thing that I think for cannabis is their safety. And their safety allows me, I pulei os slides, sorry. So the therapeutic applications have been improved over the centuries now. And because of this breeding, it's important that we understand how was the process of illegalization of cannabis, of weed in America. This is the cover of a book, and it tells all the history of cannabis and the history of prohibition of cannabis. It's not good, it's not very, it's shameful. It's shameful the way it was done in the past by in the past. So this is a very aggressive propaganda that starts 1 year before taxation. And it says, weed with roots from hell. Not recommended for children. The movie, this is the cover of a movie. And they use this kind of propaganda, very aggressive propaganda, that drive people through weird orgies and wild parties. And what was their goal back in the 90s? Not 90s, 1920, 1930. They started this aggressive propaganda against Mexicans, against black people, because they are immigrants, because of the reminiscence of slavery. Black people, and both black people and Mexican people, they use marijuana as cultural, as ritualistic, as medication. They use this. It was cultural. And because they were driven by a very xenophobic and racist and moralist propaganda, they convinced the popular opinion that cannabis was indeed a weed with roots in hell. And we started the war against drugs. After this aggressive propaganda in the beginning of our last century. What we are talking about now, that this illegalization process, it holds back our scientific discoveries, our therapeutical advances, and also our economics, because cannabis is a fruitful plant, very fruitful plant. If you're not using the flowers for medical or adult use, you can use all the other parts of the plants for fibers, textiles, papers, shoes, construction material, roads. It's infinity, the properties that can be applied to cannabis fibers and derivatives. Cannabis Business Collective paid hundreds of millions of dollars in state and local taxes, which fund projects such as roads and rural hospitals, as well as government. These are data from the United States. Again, once we apply all the benefits of cannabis plants, not medicinal, but also industrial application, we have a market of billions of dollars for taxations. People here, I'll show you. This is what dispensary medical cannabis impact was in yellow. Only dispensary and store sales. Okay? $22 billion per year. But together with industrial purposes, the additional economic impact would be 100 billion in 2022. In 2024, we can go for 130 billion impact with medicinal, adult use, and industrial use. So this is a very huge market which can provide for our population, okay, job. We have a very high unemployment rate. So we can provide job, we can provide our economy some boost. These are the numbers. These are what science tells me and what the market tells me. But now I'm going to start with you another talking. I run an ONG, non-profit ONG, called Maria Flor, here in Marília, São Paulo. And we planned today for 3,000 families. We start with this mom. This is the 80 convulsions a day kid. He already suffered 2 brain surgeries and he removed 25% of his frontal lobe. So he couldn't hold himself in the chair or his neck or anything. Once he started with imported cannabis, he reduced his convulsions for 40 a day. It's still a lot. It's half-time convulsions, but it's still, this family has no life. And, well, if you could help this family, and you know how to. This is what happened to our ONG. This woman here, she had a baby 20 years ago when she was living in Canada. And 20 years ago, regulation and legalization of cannabis in Canada starts. So she learned how to produce her kid the medicine. She studied, and her kid, even spent a time on a clinical trial. So 20 years after this, she was planting in her house, illegally planting, okay? And she was treating her sister-in-law, which has cancer, and her mother-in-law, her grandma, which has Parkinson, and her grandpa, which has dementia. She was just treating her family. She had some few plants, and okay. But one day, she heard about Mateus. And Mateus had the government support, financial support for his medication, but his imported medication couldn't arrive. I don't know how, but they weren't sending him his medication. So he started convulsing 80 times a day again. So once you see your kid getting better, and then the government stopped the support, what do? You it's a despair, yeah? What do? It's your kid. He could die. Convulsions can die. So this woman, she comes to his family and says, I have the medication. I know how to do it. Do you want? And she said, I want. 4 days after he started the treatment with a full spectrum, it's the one with cannabis, cannabidiol, and THC together, okay? With the whole plant, terpenes, flavonoids, everything. Not only CBD, okay? Not only CBD. We can see the entourage effect on this boy, and he stops convulsing 4 days after. We could not hold this information together, and we start to study, because we need to inform people that our product here in Brazil can grow better and can do as much as imported medication can do. So today we are four. We are 4 women running this huge project, which embraces not only reception and caring, where we inform people about the benefits of cannabis and hear their demands, but we are also farming and producing for this family today. And we go for education and research also. And this is the work, not that only Maria Flor are doing. All the associations, all over the country, they're doing the same work. Since we don't have a regulation, every association runs by itself, by its way, but the services are the same. So I'm going to show you how our association works, but you can expect this kind of work from any association. Today we are 4 women running the business, and this is the lady which know how to produce the medication. This is the mother, and this is a ex-businesswoman which runs the entire sector of reception and caring. And she's very good. Thank you, Sylvia. The reception and caring. So, my patients, they cannot afford 4,000, even 400, okay? They cannot afford 400 or 4,000 reais per month to treat the conditions they have. This is a Down kid which has a very difficult heart complication, which leads her to pulmonary hypertension. She doesn't need them anymore. She's treating with cannabis. This boy is Luis Otávio. He was the first patient I myself received and helped. And he has brain paralysis from the childhood. So we have a very humanized and empathic welcome, because we know they arrive to us as last resource for his treatment, for his life, for anything. So in this sector, we give them orientation about cannabis benefits for their health conditions, indication of cannabinoid therapy, and prescription evaluation. We inform them how important we have to go through this way, because it's still a gray area. We still lack of regulatory aspects. So we have to inform this person that the treatment can only happen if they have indication. And The reception and carry, they guide the patient through the bureaucratic process because it's very bureaucratic still. This is our plantation. This was our flowers. We produce here in Brazilian soil. It's possible. We don't need vases. We don't need lights. We don't need a very high cost production. You see, the medication is very expensive outside our country because they grow cannabis under lights. They are very cold countries, indoor growing. So they don't have land, they don't have sun, but we have. So I can produce the same 4K medication for 300 reais. So this is very important because, again, Brazilian population cannot afford. So cannabis is legalized for the ones who can afford. The ones who can't afford are still forbidden. So for our nutrition, we only use organic and organic nutrition and defensives. We produce everything with the land. So we use vinegar, aloe vera, we use plants, aromatic plants on contour of our stufa, our greenhouse. And we have a manual processing plant, so we don't use machines or anything because we care a lot about the resin that comes coating the flower. So we are very careful trimming the plant, the parts of plants that are not needed for the remedy, the medication. And we use artisanal, very low cost production. We have many ways of extracting phytocannabinoids, many ways. So you can extract with ice, you can extract with heat, you can extract with alcohol, and you can extract with CO2, supercritic liquids, right? Sorry. And in our own, we produce the artisanal way of doing the oil. So in the end, we have a very black, a very thick oil that we can send to analysis and come back with an amount of phytocannabinoids I have in this extract. So from this, I can produce a line of medications that allow me to work with the endocannabinoid modulation. So I have the information that how much THC I have per droplets. So this is very accurate information that cannot be achieved in your home way of doing if you are a licensed producer. The education. So we provide education for patients in the reception and caring sector, for doctors and for healthcare professionals. We offer courses and lectures and internships. Today we only offer internship for NESP because we're starting now, but in the end I want to offer internships to several different faculties and courses. This one is from agronomy. And events. These events we brought 40 doctors and vets to go immersive in our association, and he really knows and learn how we do the processing of the plant and the processing of the medication. So they all work with our association because they like and because they know the process I'm offering to my clients. We are also a very fruitful way of collecting data, because we have access not only the data from the breeding studies, but also we monitorize the growing process of the plants. We are today improving our production, and we are working on product development. So, besides the oil droplets, we have also creams and soaps and serums and suppositories, inhalation, like they call rescue medications. You can apply during a seizure or something. We have suppositories, ovule. Okay. So we have many ways and many types of products that we can use therapeutically. And recently we are building up partnerships with UNESCO, veterinary patients, and UNIFESP with oncologic human patients. And UNIFESP also with phytocannabinoid analysis. So today we are working in 3 different projects, but we're still beginning. We have only 2 years old. We also offer legal assistance, because many of patients come to me saying, I was caught with medication, or I was planning to treat illegally, but I need the medication. So we offer legal assistance for them. And this history, do you remember this lady? This lady and her husband was caught with 6 bottles of medication going to Acre. They were locked, they were caught, they were accused of traffic because of 6 bottles of medication. Very diluted, okay? Diluted medication, not extract, not hashish oil, hash oil, like they say. So she goes for domestic prison, and he stays in prison in Rondônia, the worst criminal prison in our country. And he stayed there because of several different errors that the first lawyers committed, because they didn't know about regulation, legal assistance for this type of cannabis products. So a bunch of errors were made back in there, and they are both my first founders. They both realized the ONG we run together today. She is my VP, and she is the girl who plants cannabis from 4 or 5 meters. They have this knowledge. And he is still in prison. And his time is almost ending there now. So we still nowadays are blocked because of cannabis medication. They are not prepared to evaluate which is cannabis for traffic or for recreational or for sales from the medicinal product, the diluted product. So, and also the analytics only can identify if it's a cannabis or not. For instance, they put all the 6 vials together, and they weighed 700 gramas de maconha líquida, of liquid marijuana. They are all weighted with glass and azeite, olive oil, they diluted. So they're not prepared even to understand which material, cannabis material are dead. They just don't understand. So this is where lies our another obstacles. If you want to help someone, you have to help inside the law. Otherwise, you can afford being accused as a drug dealer, which you're not. You're not. And today we are offering social assistance also. We have psychological for patients and caregivers. So we receive a kid with her mom, his mom, in the farm, while his kid is occupied with physiotherapy. The mother can go for a psychological assistance or a medical assistance or nutritional assistance, while these kids are learning and getting a treatment, a complementary treatment. We think that we can offer the oil, we can offer the medication, but we can also offer ways of improve the life quality of this family. Because when you treat one member of the family, you can cure the whole group. And we're doing a bunch of promotional material. We participate of 2 movies already, documentaries, debates, podcasts, public auditions in our city. And our city is very special because the public administration, they receive us very, very good eyes and they trust us a lot. So we have mentions and honors with them, promoted by them, and we are soon to be public utility in our city. I hope so. And we go for Veja São Paulo also. This is me and Fernanda with our first plants. And this is Cidinha with her kid. Cidinha was the first moms to receive from justice the authorization to cultivation in our home. So she was one of the leads the way to us. Today I'm a licensed producer also, and this mom also is a licensed producer for her kid. And we together, we are 30 colleagues, working colleagues, and we assist 3,000 families. You learned already about endocannabinoid system and how to work with, and these are some of the pathologies I receive here in our organization. So it goes further than the literature are saying to me, because the doctors, the doctors who understand what cannabis can do for their patients, they are prescribing, even if they're CFM, Federal Council of Medicine, if they are against. So once you study, you understand, and you know how to work with, the doctors are prescribing. Not only Alzheimer's and Parkinson, but glaucoma, hepatocolite ulcerativa, arthritis rheumatoid, because they're also autoimmune disease, and we see that CB2 are completely over our lymphocytes, our immune system. so we can modulate. Psychiatric disorders is still on study, but we still have a lot of good feedback from the patients. Autism spectrum disorder, addiction treatments, migraines, insomnia, HIV, cancer, and palliative care. Still lacks of solid evidence, but still no one can hold once you know how to work with, the doctors are working with. It's a line of care. It's a very safe line of care. And most of the countries, they are already legalized, so why not? But here in Brazil, we have a very, very, very slow way of making the law. We in Brazil are still debating if cannabis is a treatment or not. We are still debating if it's CBD or THC. We don't talk about entourage effect. We don't talk too many about endocannabinoid system. We hear a lot of anecdotal evidence, but still we are debating the basics while we should be debating science. And the science tells me that I have over 28,000 articles in PubMed. There are about there are several articles about the disorder caused by cannabis heavy users. So, for heavy users, there are disorder, but most of them are medical articles, or mechanism of action articles, or endocannabinoid articles. So, with cannabis, I can embrace the largest number of articles that science are telling me there are evidence, and they are safe. When we talk about safety and toxicity, we can understand that the safety of cannabis is it's far away from safe. There's this book from David Schmidman that says this is how much weed we would take to kill you, and it's 80 kilos in 15 minutes. You're probably gonna die of eating all this cannabis, or if you want to smoke all this cannabis, it's not possible. Yeah, it's incompatible. And we have some minimum lethal dose for dogs for THC, which is 3 grams per kilo of the dog. So for you to achieve 3 grams of pure THC, you have to be this amount of weed to produce this kind of product that would kill your dog. But not you. You are an adult. You will survive. So it's almost impossible to get an overdose with cannabis. Not happen with synthetic cannabinoids. We're talking about plant, okay? And we are talking about medical appliance. We show this because the medications are very diluted. It's impossible to reach this amount of weed inside that vial. Inside that vial, it goes 300 milligrams at tops. And about toxicity, what happens now when you go over your perfect dose? Yeah, the collateral symptoms are very, very, very smooth. It goes from a red eye, some somnolence, some dry mouth, cotton mouth, they say. But it happens that if you ingest an edible with high percentage of THC and THC, you can experience some paranoid hallucinations, some agitation, some nausea and vomiting, and heartbeat arrhythmia, anxiety or panic attacks. But you cannot die if you overdose your perfect dose. And it happens most with edibles. In other countries, they have like popsicles with THC, gummies with THC. This can confuse a kid, okay? If you go to your house with gummies which are full of THC, it can happen that your kid steal your candies and eat. So it can happen, okay? This is the caution we have to take when we are using for purpose medication. The edibles can be used with care inside your home. The medication always we put on top shelves for not accessible for kids. So this is what we do. We discuss life quality improvements. We should be discussing neuroprotection for elderly or susceptible groups, instead of discussing if cannabis is drug or not, is treatment or not. We should be discussing pain management, cancer treatment. We still have a lack of evidence in clinical evidence for shrinking tumors, but the preliminary studies already shows the mechanism of action, how cannabinoids in general can work fighting cancer with us, with the conventional treatment, chemotherapy. So the cannabinoids will work on the growth, the proliferation, angiogenesis, and infiltration metastasis. It can reduce the velocity of the uncontrolled cell growth, so it can block. It can block angiogenesis, lowering the VEGF pathway, inhibition of angiogenic signals. Augmented stress and autophagy induces apoptosis and inhibition of proliferation. And for final, once you starve to death your cancer, you can inhibit the migration, adhesion, and invasion of the metastatic capability of the cancer. So these are evidences that are showing in cells and animals, and we are seeing results in the clinical practice. Again, along with chemotherapy, not alone, okay? Cannabis treatment are also a complementary therapy. They cannot go up. It can be alone. You can use only cannabis to treat mild conditions, mild symptoms, of course. But sometimes you need a help of their friends. End of life caring. So we go through that a lot in our ONG. People who want to spend the last of their days at home with their family, they offer often searches for a doctor which treats them with cannabis. And for this group of patients, they use a very high dose of both CBD and THC for their quality of end-of-life care. Bone regeneration and recruitment. So we have very nice evidence that cannabinoids can recruit bone stem cells and improve bone remodeling. So we should be studying this. And we should be talking more about mental health. There's a research that shows that cannabinoid products improve the sales for cannabinoid products to treat anxiety and health, mental health during the pandemics. It happens a lot. And we should be talking about additional treatments because we see that once you introduce cannabis medication, you lower the consumption of nicotine cigarettes, you lower your consumption of alcohol. It's good for people who are dependent of painkillers because of this health condition or because of addiction problems, and also for sedatives, crack, cocaine, heroin, and meth. So, still in the beginning of the studies, but is a promising treatment. And to finalize my presentation, what do we expect from Brazil? Yeah? We are working for decriminalized medical use. First of all, I don't want to go on trial just because I need THC for my pain. And I treat it with all medications you want to know. Regulate cultivation for medical and industrial purposes. This is what we are expecting here from Brazil. We are very far from discussing recreative purpose, adult use. So we should focus on decriminalize medical use and regulate industrial use. So we can both improve public health and economic health of our country. And I'm going to thank these two. These two are my two first patients, Mateus and Vovó Guga. Vovó Guga is the owner of the property where I stand now, and she passed away last year, but she's a very active woman, cannabis woman, and she even borrowed some money written from her family to start our first grow room. So I'm very thankful and eternal gratitude for these two, which opened the gate for us and for my collaborators. All of them are very important to me, and all of them helps us to help 3,000 families. And University of São Paulo, my home here, which I love. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. It was a very nice topic to talk about. And I was talking about it and how many cases you must to show to governments to approve something like that, approve the treatment for these kids, because it's a sad situation for the family to live like that. I don't know if you want to comment something, but did you try to show more case to them? Because I was in your social medias and I saw something in the council and talking something And you must show this case to them.
We are already showing them. We have these public auditions where we bring often families which are in treatment, and we have several researchers and also fathers and mothers that goes to these public auditions to talk with the government, and we have several legal process ongoing for this Brazilian cultivation. And today we have many approved organizations. So these approved organizations are helping us to build up forces, and we also have a federation with this ONG for cannabis therapeutical use. So we're gaining more and more political forces to not to show them, to prove to them. We have to prove. And the science itself are not proving. We are in a very strange time when our governments look to science and say, it's not scientific enough. We saw this in pandemic, so. For cannabis, it's the same. They look the papers, we have meta-analyses, we have clinical evidences, we have several ways to prove to them that cannabis can be effective. Even if you go for a homemade oil, it can be effective. Cannot be the highest standard cannabis, but it can be a treatment for your family. And unfortunately, we're still on baby steps. But we're still working and helping too many people like we are. I help 3,000 families. Abrace in Paraíba is another organization. They go over 30,000 families. And the importation, 40,000 importation a year. So we have over 100,000 patients here in Brazil. And it's still not enough to convince our governments. I don't know what's going to convince them, but it's important that they also see the numbers, because the medical use of cannabis can be helpful for the country, not only for the public health, but also for the economic health of the country. And still, they are not looking to it. They are still thinking that these are the weed with roots in hell. Unfortunately.
Thank you. We have questions? No? On YouTube? It's from Silvia Helena de Almeida. First, she says, thank you very much, Carol Mamoni, for our team work together in Maria Flor. And she's asking, what is the difference between marijuana and cannabidiol?
Marijuana is only the popular name of cannabis. And cannabidiol is the only one molecule that are produced by cannabis. Marijuana, maconha, Mary Jane, weed, they are all the same species of plant. And the cannabidiol is the only one molecule over 500 molecules that are produced by the plant. And the cannabidiol was the first and mostly widely researched molecule, and the one who paved the way of regulation and legalization in the United States and all other countries in the United European, right, Union. And THC are the other molecule, but THC is always associated with the psychoactive substance. So they look for this word, psychoactive, and they forget that THC is also medicinal. Very potent molecule.
We have more questions? No? But I have a question.
Okay.
When these kids use this product, when you say you use the cannabis in total, yes, they have presented the symptoms like head eyes, dry mouth, no?
Only the very sensitive, in the first days are experiencing the red eyes or the cotton mouth, but it's also very easy to regulate the dosage. When you use oil, you start with 1 droplet and goes from 2 and 3 over the days. You can take like 1 week with one same dosage before changing the dosage, just for your endocannabinoid system to auto-regulate itself, just to help. Then you go over increasing your dose very slowly because of the fine tune of the medication. So you have terpenoids, alkaloids, phytocannabinoids, and you have to wait for this medication to work itself before raising the dose. It's not it's very easy to dosing, this fine tune, but we don't have like a guide because each person is unique. Each endocannabinoid system is unique, and each physical condition also. So my pathology is different from yours, so I require high dose, and maybe you require 1 droplet. So it depends. And most of these symptoms, they tend to disappear over the days. So if you presented the symptom with 2 droplets a day, you reduce the dose for 1 droplet a day. And then you wait. If you need another droplet 1 month from now, it's okay. You can increase every month.
Thanks again. We don't have more questions. Oh, yes.
Maybe a short one, if time's allows. Thank you for the presentation. Can you say something about cannabis social clubs? The phenomenon, does it exist in Brazil, and how is it perceived? Is it encouraged? Is it also illegal? Or because in Europe, cannabis social clubs are on the rise.
Cannabis social clubs are legal now in Europe, right? Here in Brazil, they are not legal yet because they don't look adult use with good eyes. But I look to cannabis clubs for harm reduction, because with cannabis clubs, you have a conscient adult use, yeah? And you don't go for the traffic to obtain your plant. You plant together so you consume as adult and conscience. Yeah. So I see with good eyes, for the future, for harm reduction. I think it's a very, very suitable for the country and very, very intelligent way of legalize adult use.
Thank you. We don't have questions anymore. So thank you so much for your attention. And I don't know if Professor Eliane would like to talk something, but no. And thank you for your attention. And I hope that you enjoyed this event. And thank you so much.